They drilled into the side of a ridge in eastern Turkey and lowered a camera into the hole. The feed came back. The tent went still. The lead researcher stood up, walked outside, and did not return. The footage has not been made public. The site has been quietly wound down. The team has stopped taking calls. So, what exactly is down there? And why is everyone who has seen it suddenly refusing to speak? Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. A ship on the wrong mountain. Everyone has been looking in the wrong place. For generations, searchers have thrown themselves at the slopes of Mount Ararat. Crampons, cameras, frostbite, and bad weather. Return after return, with nothing but ice crystals and disappointment. The mountain has swallowed careers whole and given back nothing. The real site is roughly 20 miles south, a smaller, harder mountain, Mount Tenderek. The ground there is volcanic and fractured. The wind is relentless. The villages in the valley beneath it are among the oldest continuously settled places on the planet. And here is the thing you need to understand before anything else. The people who live in those villages have a name for the shape on the slope above them. They call it the ship. They have been calling it that for as long as their memory reaches back. Not because a scholar told them to. Not because of a book. Because that is what it looks like from the valley floor, when the light hits it right. From the ground, you can dismiss it. Just another ridge in a country full of ridges. Broken geology. Nothing special. From the air, the shape becomes something else entirely. Long, narrow, symmetrical at both ends, tapered like a hull, nearly 3 football fields from tip to tip. The outside world first caught a clear look at it in 1959. A Turkish military captain named İlhan Durupınar was flying a NATO reconnaissance mission when the outline appeared beneath his aircraft. He photographed it. Those photographs reached military analysts, and the whisper started. What if it had been sitting there the whole time? What stopped the laughter was the measurement. The shape on that slope runs approximately 515 feet in length. Genesis instructs Noah to build the ark at 300 cubits. Depending on which ancient cubit standard you apply, that converts to somewhere between 450 and 515 feet. The first researchers to run that comparison sat down on the cold ground and stared at their instruments for a long time before any of them said a word. They went home with the numbers written in their notebooks and no idea what to do with them. The Turkish government took it seriously enough to send an official team in 1960. That team came back with readings nobody could properly interpret at the time. They filed their report. They walked away. And for the better part of 5 decades, the mountain held whatever was underneath it in silence. What the radar found. You need to understand what ground-penetrating radar actually does. It does not simply confirm that something is buried. It reads the shape of it, the density, the internal layering. It slices through earth the way a blade moves through paper and reads the cross-section. 3-dimensional subsurface imaging takes those individual slices and builds them into a coherent picture. When a new research team brought that equipment to the Durupınar Formation and powered it up, the data started returning almost immediately. It did not look like dirt. It looked like architecture. The scans showed long parallel lines running along the full length of the formation. Right angles appeared in the data, the kind of geometry that natural processes almost never produce unassisted. What appeared to be horizontal floors, stacked one above the other. Vertical divisions, separating the interior into discrete enclosed spaces. The word the researchers kept using on their audio recordings was compartments. Whatever was inside that shape was divided into rooms. Now, pause on that. Genesis does not describe Noah's Ark as a single open chamber. It describes 3 decks, lower, middle, upper, and rooms throughout. Not a cargo hold. Rooms. The scans the team was pulling out of that ridge were matching that description with a precision nobody on site had been ready for. They had come to disprove it. That was the working assumption. They expected to find a geological quirk, a basalt formation shaped by lava flow and erosion, that would explain away every rumor and let everyone go home. Instead, they were looking at 3 layered decks, divided into internal chambers, buried inside a mountain in the precise region the ancient text identifies. And that was only what the surface scans could reach. The radar could tell them the structure existed. It could not tell them what was inside the rooms. To find that out, they were going to have to cut holes in the mountain. They started planning the drill sites that night. The flood is not one story. Before we get to what came out of those boreholes, you need to understand why this matters beyond the archaeology. Because the story behind this site does not belong to one tradition. The flood narrative is not a Hebrew invention. It is not a Christian invention. It is not the property of any single culture or text. It is everywhere. Close to 200 separate cultures, spread across every inhabited continent on Earth, carry a version of the same memory: a catastrophic flood, a righteous survivor, a vessel, animals preserved, a world rebuilt from almost nothing. The Babylonians pressed the account into clay tablets thousands of years before Genesis existed in its current form. Their version describes a man named Utnapishtim who constructed an enormous boat to ride out a divinely sent deluge. The structural details and dimensions align with the biblical account in ways that are difficult to explain away as coincidence. The British Museum holds a tablet describing a circular arc built from reeds and bitumen, complete with engineering specifications so precise that, when researchers actually built a replica to scale, it floated. The ancient world was not only telling stories, it was preserving construction knowledge. The Hindu tradition records Manu, warned by a divine fish, building a vessel to survive the Great Flood. The Greeks had Deucalion. The Mayans, the Aztecs, the Hawaiians, Aboriginal cultures across Australia, and indigenous nations of the Pacific Northwest all carry this memory. The vessel changes shape, the names shift, the geography adjusts, but the core of the story holds across every version. The world drowned. A remnant survived. And the vessel that carried them came to rest on a mountain when the water finally fell. You can call one culture's flood story a myth. You can call 2 of them coincidence. You can probably dismiss 10 without much discomfort. Dismissing 200 cultures, cultures with no contact with each other, separated by oceans and centuries, becomes a different intellectual exercise entirely. Something happened. The record is too consistent and too widespread to have been invented. The soil did not match. If the radar was the first crack, the soil chemistry brought the wall down. The team did what careful researchers always do. They pulled samples from inside the formation's boundary and samples from the slopes immediately surrounding it, then ran the chemistry side by side. 2 patches of dirt on the same mountain should produce nearly identical results. That is how mountain dirt works. The soil inside the formation was not the same dirt. Organic carbon levels were elevated well above what the surrounding terrain could account for. There was more decomposed plant and animal material concentrated inside the boundary than the surrounding geology had any mechanism to explain. The mineral profile showed iron oxides and metallic traces in concentrations that did not match the surrounding bedrock. Even the vegetation on the surface told the story. The grass growing over the formation came in a slightly different color. It grew at a different rate. The kind of subtle difference you only catch if you are watching carefully, but impossible to mistake once you see it. Something underneath that ground is altering the chemistry of everything above it. Wood, over sufficient time, leaves a specific signature in the earth around it. It releases carbon back into the soil. It changes drainage patterns. It affects what will grow above it and how fast. The chemical readings from the Durapanar Formation are consistent with a massive organic structure that decomposed slowly in place over a very long period of time. Not confirmation, but consistent. The data is consistent with that hypothesis. The team also found pockets of petrified material at multiple points along the formation's perimeter. Material that does not match the volcanic rock composing the rest of the mountain. Samples were pulled and sent to a laboratory. One technician who handled those samples called a colleague that evening and said something he was not cleared to say. He said the material had originally been something that grew. He said he had stopped sleeping. He asked the colleague not to repeat it. The next morning, the samples were moved to a locked cabinet. The technician stopped returning calls. The stones nobody can explain. The site does not end at the boat-shaped ridge. A few miles down the valley, outside a village called Kazan, there are stones, large ones, roughly the height of a two-story building, carved from basalt, weighing multiple tons each. They are standing upright, alone in the open ground, far from any quarry that could plausibly have produced them. There is no recorded ancient civilization in this region with the known capacity to move objects of that mass. Each stone has a hole drilled through it near the top, not a small aperture, a hole large enough to pass heavy rope through. The local name for these stones, carried down through generations, is anchor stones. The valley's tradition holds that they were dragged behind the ark during the flood to stabilize it against the surge of water. That explanation sounds impossible until you are standing next to one. They are aligned in a line that points directly back toward the formation on the slope above. Several carry crosses carved into their faces. Those carvings date to the early Christian period. The stones themselves are considerably older. Nobody knows who made them. Nobody knows how they were moved. No credible alternative explanation for why these specific objects, with these specific holes, are arranged in this specific valley, pointing at a boat-shaped ridge above, has ever been offered. The man they called God's archaeologist. Long before any radar truck arrived, one man had already dedicated his life to this site and refused to let it go. Ron Wyatt was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee. No formal archaeological training, no institutional backing, no patience for the people who told him he was wasting his life. In 1977, he saw the aerial photograph in a magazine, the same image that had been quietly circulating since Durapanar first published it. Most people glanced at it and moved on. Wyatt looked at it and made a decision that consumed the next 22 years of his existence. He flew to Turkey. He walked the ridge repeatedly. He brought back samples, fragments he identified as petrified wood, metallic objects he claimed were corroded structural fasteners, and photographs of what he described as ship ribs pushing through the soil. He documented what appeared to be symmetrical, rib-like formations running along both sides of the shape, precisely where a wooden hull's ribs would sit. He gave lectures. He wrote books. His supporters called him God's archaeologist. His critics were less generous. The academic mainstream dismissed him almost entirely. He died in 1999, still insisting he had found what he came looking for. Here is what makes that uncomfortable now. The modern scans of the Durapanar Formation, conducted by credentialed researchers with professional-grade equipment, are not refuting Ron Wyatt's essential claim about the shape. They are confirming elements of it. The dimensions he fixated on are being validated. The internal structure he described is appearing in the radar data. The metallic anomalies he pointed to are showing up in soil analysis. The man may have overreached badly on other claims in his life. On this specific site, At this specific location, the data is no longer dismissing him. The data is asking the same question he spent 2 decades asking, and the people who spent 30 years mocking him are the ones who now have to answer it. When the cameras went in, no previous investigation had cut directly into the formation and sent imaging equipment down into it. The current team did. They selected drill positions based on where the radar maps showed the strongest structural anomalies beneath the surface. The process was methodical. Every bore site was chosen deliberately, cross-referenced against the 3-dimensional subsurface maps the radar team had spent weeks building. Nothing was left to instinct. The drills went down through soil and compacted material, through layers that had not been disturbed in thousands of years. At a certain depth, the resistance changed. Not gradually, suddenly. The drill bits surfaced coated with a residue that did not match the surrounding rock. Whatever the equipment had reached was not part of the mountain. It had never been part of the mountain. Then they sent the cameras down. Borescopes, narrow, high-resolution instruments with their own light sources, designed to transmit live feedback to monitors at the surface, engineered specifically for this kind of work, for seeing into spaces that have no business being seen. The first images returned nothing but darkness and dust. Decades of settled particulate, disturbed by the drilling, catching the light and scattering it back at the lens. The team adjusted. They waited. The focus sharpened. The image on the monitor resolved into structure, chamber walls, a partition dividing the interior space, and a corner where 2 surfaces met at something close to a right angle. The geometry was wrong for a natural rock formation, too deliberate, too consistent. The texture of the walls was inconsistent with raw stone, almost layered, almost grained, the look of a material that had been compressed and slowly mineralized over enormous spans of time. Running across the surface were long, parallel lines, a grain pattern, the signature that wood leaves behind when it has been buried for millennia and turned gradually to stone. Anyone who has ever examined petrified timber under laboratory conditions would have recognized what they were looking at. Several people in that tent had. The cameras went deeper. At roughly 14 feet of depth, the lens reached something that stopped conversation in the tent entirely. A line of dark openings cut into the partition wall at regular intervals, evenly spaced, each one approximately the same size, each one leading into another dark space behind it. The spacing was not random. It had the quality of intention, the quality of design. Not gas pockets, not erosion damage, openings. You could hear the breathing on the audio track shift. The kind of involuntary change in the room when a group of people realizes, at the same moment, that the thing they expected to disprove has just done something a geological anomaly cannot do. At 19 feet, the camera found what appeared to be a horizontal beam crossing the ceiling of the chamber. Dark, straight, showing the same compressed grain texture as the walls, too straight to be a natural feature, too long to be a mineral vein. It ran across the full width of what the camera could capture and continued beyond the edge of the frame on both sides. Whatever it was had been put there deliberately, placed with purpose a very long time ago. The geologist in the tent leaned forward until his forehead nearly touched the monitor screen. He had been doing this work for over 2 decades. He had a vocabulary for what he was looking at that most people in that tent did not share. He used none of it. He said nothing at all. The researcher beside him, the one who had spent 6 months informing journalists she was there specifically to debunk the site, the one whose institution had funded her presence as a counterweight to what they privately called wishful science, said 4 words aloud. Undeniably constructed. Then she looked at the geologist, then back at the screen. Nobody else in the tent spoke. Nobody moved to write anything down. The audio kept recording. The camera kept transmitting. And whatever was at the bottom of that borehole kept existing, indifferent to the silence it had produced in the people above it. Why the site went quiet. The full footage has not been released. What the team has said publicly is measured to the point of surgical precision. The readings are unusual. Further drilling is required. The site warrants further investigation. Every word in every statement has been chosen the way you choose words when you know that other words, the real ones, the accurate ones, would detonate something you are not ready to detonate. They have not used the words Noah's Ark in any official capacity, not once, not in any press release, any conference statement, or any peer-reviewed submission. But the silence around those careful words tells its own story. The same people who were giving weekly press updates have stopped issuing them entirely. The researcher who said, "undeniably constructed," in that tent has stopped giving interviews. She gave 3 in the weeks after the initial drilling, then 2, then 1, then nothing. Her institution has not explained why. Her colleagues will not say where she is. When journalists who covered her earlier statements attempt to follow up, they are redirected to communications offices that do not respond. The geologist has reportedly requested reassignment to a different project in a different country. 2 original survey team members have left the project without public explanation. Their names have been quietly removed from the project's official documentation. The petrified samples are sitting in a locked cabinet in an unnamed laboratory. The technician who handled them and called a colleague in distress that night has not spoken to the press. The colleague he called has declined every interview request. The samples have not been submitted for independent analysis. Nobody will say when or whether they will be. The people who knew the answers are choosing one by one to stop being the people who answer questions. And the institutional silence surrounding them has the quality not of bureaucratic delay, but of something more deliberate, more considered. The kind of quiet that organizations produce when they have decided that a specific piece of information is not ready for the world. And in their off-record moments, in hotel bars after conferences end, in hallway conversations that stop when recorders appear, at kitchen tables at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the weight of it becomes too heavy to carry alone, the picture that comes through is not careful at all. It is something closer to awe, something closer to fear. The gap between their public statements and their private ones is not a small gap. It is a chasm. Whatever the camera is moving through, the team has not reached the end of it. The structure continues beyond what any of the bore sites have so far captured. The compartments do not terminate where the scans predicted they might. The compartments do not terminate where the scans predicted they might. The scale of what is down there appears, with each new feed, to be larger than the surface evidence suggested. Whatever is in those rooms has been waiting in the dark for a long time. 5,000 years by the most generous reading of the ancient text. Longer by others. It has waited through empires that rose and collapsed without ever knowing it existed. It has waited through wars fought on the ground directly beneath it. It has waited while the people in the valley pointed at the slope and called it the ship, and were laughed at by everyone who looked at maps instead of mountains and thought that made them wise. And now there is a camera inside it, and the people watching the feed have gone silent. What comes next? The next phase of this investigation is already being planned. Larger bore openings, higher resolution imaging capable of resolving finer surface detail at greater depth, and direct surface sampling of the interior walls for carbon dating. That last step is the one that matters most. Carbon dating of the interior material would either close this question definitively or open it in a way that cannot be walked back. The team knows that. Everyone who understands what is at stake knows that. Whether the political and institutional circumstances will allow it to happen is a question nobody connected to the project will answer directly. If access holds and the situation in the region remains stable, the next 12 to 18 months could produce the most significant archaeological announcement in the history of the discipline. That is not hyperbole. That is the unspoken arithmetic of what the data already shows. What is already established is this: the formation is real. The 515-foot length is real. The match to 300 cubits in Genesis is real, and it is not approximate. It sits at the precise upper boundary of the accepted cubit range. The radar is producing internal structure that standard geology has no convincing mechanism to explain. The soil chemistry fits the profile of a massive, decayed organic mass in ways that are specific, replicable, and inconsistent with the surrounding terrain. The anchor stones in the valley below have no credible alternative explanation. Not one that accounts for their size, their placement, their alignment, and their holes simultaneously. The people who have been pointing at that ridge for 5,000 years and calling it a ship have not changed their story. Not once, not under any pressure. And the team that put a camera inside it has stopped talking. Think carefully about what that silence actually means, not the official silence. Institutions go quiet for mundane reasons all the time. Funding disputes, jurisdictional friction, bureaucratic caution. Think about the personal silence, the individual silence. The silence of specific human beings who went to a mountain in eastern Turkey expecting to disprove a biblical story and came back from it unable to speak about what they found in any normal professional register. Researchers who were eager for documentary crews 6 months ago are refusing calls. An institution that was issuing regular updates has gone entirely dark. The deepest footage has not been shared with anyone outside the core team. The geologist is not sleeping. The female researcher has vanished from the professional conference circuit she had been a visible presence in for years. 2 members of the original team have left without explanation and cannot be reached. All of them have seen something they were not prepared to see. All of them went in with professional frameworks for understanding what the Earth holds and what it does not. And all of them have come back from whatever those cameras showed them without the language to explain it in the terms they spent their careers building. Somewhere on the slope of Mount Tenderek, in a canvas tent on a cold, wind-cut mountain where the wind never fully stops and the nearest town is older than most recorded civilizations, there is a monitor still showing a live feed from a camera that is still going deeper into something that, by every established rule of geology and recorded history, should not be there. Compartments keep going. The doorways keep going. The grain pattern on the walls keeps going. The structure does not end where logic says it should. It continues downward and inward into a darkness that the cameras are only now beginning to map. Whatever the camera is moving through, it has not yet found the end. And whatever has been held inside those rooms for 5,000 years of uninterrupted darkness is still there, waiting, not knowing it has been found, not knowing the light has finally arrived, not knowing that, somewhere above it, in a tent on a cold mountain, a group of scientists who came to prove it did not exist, are sitting very still and not talking to each other. If this opened something in you, drop one word in the comments. Believer or skeptic? Tell me where you stand after watching this. Hit like so the algorithm carries this to the people who need to see it. And subscribe, because the next dispatch from inside that mountain is not something you want to hear about secondhand. The story is not finished. It may have only just begun,